Hello and welcome back to the VolReport Show. I'm Ryan Sylvia with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network, and today we're going to do something we haven't done before, something a little bit different. We're going to do a mailbag episode over in the Rocky Top forum at VolReport.com. I asked everybody, hey, if you have any questions for the next VolReport Show, drop them right here and we'll get to them. So we have a handful of questions that we're going to get to right now. Ranging throughout football, basketball, and even previewing baseball season, because that's getting going in a little less than 2 months. So it felt like a good time to open up the floor for some questions. If you want to be a part of the next show, if you want to ask questions and be featured the next time we do a mailbag episode, head over to volreport.com, grab yourself a subscription, take part in the community over in the VolReport forum and over at volreport.com, the Rocky Top forum and volreport.com. It's a good time over there. We've been talking a lot about football, obviously, but as I just mentioned, basketball season's here, baseball season's heating up, and you'll also get access to all of our premium content. Just dropped a kind of preview for the depth chart for football in 2024. I broke down the play calls on Nico Iamaleava's first 4 touchdowns during the Citrus Bowl. So if that intrigues you, if that's something you think you would like, head over there. Grab yourself a subscription, but that'll be enough of kind of that self-plug. And without further ado, we're going to jump into these questions. The first one comes from Donaldson Sam, which I want to give a shout out to him because he has been a big part of the community over there and been very engaged with our content. So we appreciate that. But his first question comes about the transfer portal. And he asks, how many ads for this portal class do you think could happen? Right now, Tennessee is sitting at 4 incoming transfers. Jermod McCoy, Chris Brazzell II, Holden Stays, and Jacoby Thomas are going to be those 4. So you get 2 defensive backs, a wide receiver, and a tight end. Last year, Rivals list Tennessee as bringing in 10 transfers. I don't know if Tennessee is going to hit that 10 mark again this year because I feel like they're pretty comfortable a lot of positions with where they are. But I think that there should be an expectation that they get a handful more, maybe get up towards the 6, 7, 8 mark by the time that this kind of transfer portal is all said and done for this upcoming class. We'll get into the position of needs in a second because that was kind of a follow-up from Donaldson Sam. But a lot of guys are off the board, obviously, but there's still some big names out there that Tennessee's interested in, Tennessee's going after, and that they would love to be able to bring onto campus. But right now, they feel a little bit more picky, I think is safe to say. They're not just going to bring in anyone right now just for the sake of bringing in a transfer. So I feel like there's going to be a handful of more. And also, you could raise that number to 5. Eli Purcell, he's not listed on the Rivals transfer tracker right now, but a guy from Wofford who's looking to make that move and be a part of the Tennessee linebacking core. So there's a few more guys I think Tennessee could be in the business of adding, but I'm not sure if they'll hit that 10 mark that they set last year. The next question, as I mentioned, what positions is Tennessee going to go after in the portal? For me, there's a handful. I think you start on the offensive line, but then you have to remember that is so difficult right now to land guys out of the portal on the offensive line that are going to be contributors. Tennessee's done a good job at that. A lot of guys on the offensive line right now and that have contributed are through the transfer portal. You go back to Cade Mays, and that's a little bit different because of the Mays connection, but that's a guy that started his career at Georgia and ended up coming over. Then you look at Gerald Mincey, a guy from Florida who's projected to be your starter at right tackle. And then you flip across to the other tackle spot at left tackle. John Campbell is a guy from Miami who came in and has been a good transfer. But Tennessee's also missed on their fair share of transfers, right? Andre Carrick, he's still young. He's projected to be part of the roster next year and maybe be in the battle for a guard position, but he hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype through 1 year. And he's battled through injury, but he hasn't been really a part of that rotation for Tennessee on the offensive line. So Tennessee, I think they're going to look to try to add another piece, but it might be tough and it might not be the easiest thing for them to be able to do, specifically at the guard position, because you lose Ollie Lane. And at the moment of recording this, Javonte Spraggins has not announced what his intentions are for next season. So you have 1 to 2 spots there that you're going to need to fill, and the portal could be an option, but it is so tough. If you flip to the defensive line, that's a spot where I think Tennessee could really stand. to benefit from adding in some guys through the transfer portal, specifically on the interior. Tennessee's got a good group of edge rushers. When you're looking at defensive end, when you're looking at Leo, they're deep there. I mean, defensive end alone, you have experience there, but then you also have younger guys like a Tyree West, who in the Citrus Bowl played really, really well. And then when you look at the Leo position, obviously James Pierce Jr., who is a stud, who just dominated that Citrus Bowl, is going to be your starter. Well, if you look behind him, you can get to a guy like, excuse me, like a Joshua Josephs, like a Caleb Herring. And then you bring in a group of freshmen that are also prepared to be really impactful, like a Jordan Ross, who just had a great game in the UA All-America game down in Orlando on Wednesday. So you feel pretty good, I think, about your edge rushing situation. The interior is where it gets a little hairy. Amari Thomas announced he's coming back. That's massive. Then you have Omar Norman Lott. Is he going to come back? He went through senior day activities as a junior, but he hasn't announced technically yet if he plans on coming back. I think he will be with the team next year, and he would probably be that starter next to Amari Thomas if he does return. Elijah Simmons, another guy that has a year of eligibility, that went through senior day festivities and hasn't fully announced if he plans to return. He's really heated up towards the end of the year. Bryson Eason, another guy with experience, and then David Hobbs, a younger guy, a freshman from last year who will be a sophomore in 2024. Outside of that, you don't have a lot of depth at defensive tackle that you probably feel really good about going into next season. So I think that that's a spot Tennessee could look in the portal to try to get a guy. And it doesn't need to be a day one starter guy, but just a guy to kind of supplement that rotation that Rodney Garner has liked to use on the defensive line. If they don't get a guy, or even if they do get a guy, though, I think that Rabbits package is something that we could see a lot, where you get the 3 edge rushers in, you push the 1 towards the interior and get them in the 3 technique. I think that that's something Tennessee will look to a lot next year as well. But adding a defensive tackle could go a long way. Another spot that I think Tennessee could look to add someone at is kicker. That's been where Tennessee's gotten both of its kickers under Josh Heupel. Chase McGrath, the guy from USC. Charles Campbell, guy from Indiana. Well, Charles Campbell's out of eligibility. Right now, it looks like it would be Josh Turbeville, who's done the kickoff for Tennessee, and he's done a fine job at that. He'll be a redshirt sophomore next year. I don't think they hate the idea of Josh Turbeville being their place kicker, but if you can add another guy, even if it's another guy like a Charles Campbell that maybe just plays for 1 year and has that 1 year of eligibility, but if that can be kind of your bridge there, I think that that would be something to look into as well. But that can also be a situation like the offensive line, where it's not the easiest thing in the world to get this fantastic, doesn't miss kicker out of the transfer portal. Tennessee's been pretty lucky with that, right? Chase McGrath was a very solid kicker, obviously made one of the biggest kicks in Tennessee football history. And there's been plenty of huge kicks, thinking back to those Florida games and whatnot back in the early 2000s. But he makes that big kick against Alabama, and it flutters in, but it goes in. And he was pretty solid in his 2 years in Knoxville. Charles Campbell, similar guy, where within 40, he was automatic. You maybe didn't have the range with Charles Campbell that you've had in the past with some kickers, but he got the job done, and he did what he was asked of in his 1 year with Tennessee. Can they get a guy like that out of the transfer portal? We'll see. It's not the end of the world if they don't, but I do think that's another position that they could be possibly looking into. Otherwise, right now, it seems to be Josh Turbeville's job. Maybe there's someone else that'll step up and take it during the offseason, but Josh Turbeville seems like the guy that if right now Tennessee had to play a game tomorrow with next year's roster, I think that he's probably your place kicker. Last question from Donaldson Sam. To the recruiting trail we go now. Does Tennessee lead for any 2025 QBs? So Tennessee in 2023 obviously brings in Nico Iamaleava. He's now going to be your starter as a redshirt freshman. QB2, QB3, going to be either the true freshman of the 2024 class, Jake Merklinger, or the experienced Gaston Moore. Kind of take your pick there. Now you turn the page to 2025. There was 2 in-state guys that Tennessee had towards the top of their list. The first one being Deuce Knight, who is a commit to Notre Dame. And Tennessee was really towards the top of his list there. Some things happen. He ends up going to Notre Dame and is no longer even an in-state recruit at this point, going back to Mississippi to finish out his high school career. So he's theoretically off the board as a verbal commit to Notre Dame. He was the top dual threat quarterback in the class, 6'4", 190, 33 national player, 4-star prospect. He was a good commit, a good prospect, I should say, and Tennessee misses on him. So now you turn the page to George McIntyre, who has really been Tennessee's main focus so far in the 2025 class in terms of quarterbacks. He's the 27 national player, another 4-star prospect, the number 1 player out of Tennessee. He's at Brentwood Academy right now in the Middle State, number 3 as at the pro style position, and he's got commits from everywhere across the country. Tennessee kind of fluttering in that top 3 in contention for him, but right now the team to beat looks like it is Alabama. So Tennessee, I don't think they hate the spot they're in with George McIntyre, but they have some catching up to do with the Tide. So then if you don't land George McIntyre, which I'm not saying Tennessee's completely out of the race, but if things trend and continue to trend to where they look like they are right now, and McIntyre's off the table, the next guy on the list is going to be Madden Iamaleava, obviously the younger brother of Nico. He's a 4-star prospect in his own right. He is a good prospect, 146th national throughout all positions, 15th out of California, number 3 dual threat in the country. And he's got offers from across the country, especially over out west where he's from. And Tennessee feels like maybe that's their ace in the hole, is having that family connection with Nico and Madden and kind of reuniting them back onto the same team. And we've seen Tennessee take advantage of that with the Garlands, obviously with the Mays brothers and the Spillmans, and they've had, and the Herrings. They've had these family connections over at Tennessee that they've used to their advantage. But you never know if that's something that will fully play out. Maybe Madden wants to kind of carve his own path somewhere else. You don't fully know yet. Tennessee right now has the fan future cast, but there's no future cast crystal ball from Rivals reporters and the Rivals staff saying that Madden is going, they think he's going to go to Tennessee. But those are your 2 guys right now, George McIntyre, in-state, Madden Iamaleava, Nico's younger brother. Tennessee might not land either, though. I'll leave it at that. I'm not saying they won't land either, but there's a chance they don't land either. And then from there, you might be in a tougher position for your 2025 quarterback. Does Tennessee need an elite 2025 quarterback? Obviously, you want a really good quarterback. That they always say your quarterback makes your class. But Nico will still be on the roster. We'll see what Jake Merklinger looks like. And with the transfer portal, every year these top quarterbacks are flipping schools and going to different places. So we'll see what that ends up looking like. But as I said, right now, the 2 guys that they want the most, George McIntyre and Madden Iamaleava. But we'll see how that ends up playing out, because the 2025 class, obviously the recruiting process for that's been going on for a while, but now that's the main class on the table. So things should be heating up in that regard very quickly. Let's talk about the current roster. Speaking of the Iamaleava family, Nico, PA_Vol_fan, PA Vol fan over on the forum asks, where does Nico need to grow in the offseason? Obviously, we saw him play very well in the Citrus Bowl. I don't think you can be upset at all about what he did against Iowa's defense, and a very respected Iowa defense at that in the game. 3 rushing touchdowns, threw for a touchdown. I believe it was 151 passing yards. The rushing stats look a little worse than they actually were, just because you have to factor in the sacks. And so that kind of brings the number down. But he was very mobile. He was escaping the pocket. You think to the play to Ramel Keaton down the sideline. When he rolls out to his right, extends the play, there's a beautiful ball to Ramel Keaton, who makes a great catch down the sideline. That's probably the highlight of the game when you're talking about throws from Nico. That's the ceiling that he has, right? Where he needs to grow, I think, is learning when he can't take that sack. When he's capable of extending all these plays. We've seen it. We saw it against Iowa. We saw it in relief. We saw it in high school. He's a very, very athletic quarterback, and he's able to roll out, escape the pocket, extend these plays. Sometimes you just need to bench the ball, though. And that was the biggest thing that I took away from the game negatively. If you had to nitpick something off of a true freshman's first start, it was sometimes those sacks seemed maybe a little bit avoidable. And the offensive line wasn't helping him. It was still a bit of a patchwork offensive line when you have guys like a Dane Davis in the game for big periods of time. But some of the times he would sense the pressure and maybe rely a little bit too much on his athletic ability, when sometimes you just need to get that ball out of there and take 2nd and 10 and then just go from there. But that feels kind of nitpicky, right? Because Nico played really, really well in the Citrus Bowl. And I think Tennessee fans have to be really happy about how he looked. And now he has a full offseason as QB1, and it should be exciting for him and Tennessee going forward, as they really feel like they have their guy at quarterback for at least the next 2 seasons, and we'll see where it goes from there. But like I said, I have to nitpick something. If you're going to make me pick something, I would say there's a few times that he could get rid of the ball and maybe not take a sack, but that is something that comes with age, and now they have that full game of film to work on with him as well. We're going to go to a question from the Master Man now. Keeping it with football, what are my thoughts on the retooled secondary Tennessee is going with? You lose every single starter from the secondary last year, including Kamal Haddon's replacement in Danico Slaughter. So it's going to be a new look all the way through. You got a preview of that in the Citrus Bowl in guys like Ricky Gibson III, Jordan Thomas, Andre Turrentine. But even outside of that, you still have 2 more spots that we didn't get a preview of yet necessarily. One of them being a cornerback spot, one of them being the safety spot. I mentioned earlier, I did a full way too early depth chart preview for premium subscribers. I'll give away my starters right now that I put in that. At cornerback, as I just mentioned, Ricky Gibson III, he'll be a sophomore, and I think Tennessee feels really good about what he can bring them there. Opposite of him, Jermod McCoy, the transfer from Oregon State. He's also a sophomore, but had a breakout freshman year with the Beavers out west. I think those are going to be your 2 cornerbacks. Very young, but very, very talented. At star, we all know it's going to be Jordan Thomas. He technically didn't start the game, I guess, in the Citrus Bowl because they came out in that 4-3 with Caleb Perry as the 3rd linebacker. But in typical games, when Tennessee's in their nickel scheme and they have that star on the field, Jordan Thomas, who will be a junior next year, is the guy to look for. At safety, Andre Turrentine, former Ohio State Buckeye, transferred in a few years back. He's had to wait his turn. He'll now be a redshirt junior, but he's another guy. Keep saying it. In the Citrus Bowl, he balled out, man. He had that big interception in the end zone where he jumps a route, keeps Iowa off the board. At that time, there's goose eggs on both sides of the scoreboard. That could have been a big differential in the game. Iowa sticks in an early touchdown, goes up 7-0. Maybe that game plays out a little bit differently. Instead, Tennessee gets the ball back and ends up winning that game 35-0. And he played really, really well in that safety spot. So I think he's got one of them locked down. The other one's a little bit more of a question. Right now, I have the MTSU transfer, Jacoby Thomas, as the guy there. But that could look a little bit different by the time that we get to week 1 of the 2024 season. Maybe John Slaughter, who was a freshman last year, steps up. Maybe they add another guy in the portal. Maybe they move someone like a Christian Harrison, a Jordan Matthews, who right now are working at cornerback. Maybe they take a little bit of a position change and rotate back to safety. We'll see how that exactly plays out. But I think the secondary is a lot more talented now. In the past, it was experience. You had guys that had been there, done that have played at the SEC level or at high levels of college football before, but weren't necessarily future NFL guys. Now you have a secondary that's young, but the ceiling is really high. They're sophomores and juniors and redshirt juniors, but they're guys by the time they finish their college career could be hearing their name called in the NFL draft. And I think that's a necessary step for Tennessee to take under Josh Heupel. Is you value the veterans, you value the guys that have done it. But if you're able to develop some guys in the secondary and feel really good about the talent level you have back there, which I think is what's starting to happen, even when you look at the freshman class with a Boo Carter, with a Caleb Beasley, I think that's where Tennessee needs to go as a program, and that's going to be the step that they're taking this upcoming year. So I feel good about it. I think that there's going to be some growing pains, some mistakes, but overall, I think you have to feel pretty good about that secondary and where it's at least heading and the trajectory of it going in the future. We have another question from the master man. He asks, who on the team is a surefire NFL star? And that's a fun question, right? Because it's always fun when you turn on the TV on a Sunday and you see Alontae Taylor make a big play. You see Alvin Kamara rush for however many touchdowns he's going for. You see this year Josh Dobbs start to have some of these breakout games. Derek Barnett coming in with some sacks. Josh Palmer catch a big touchdown for the Chargers. You can go on and on with all these guys that are former Vols in the NFL that are representing UT. So who's going to be the next? In my opinion, I think it's pretty clear who's going to be the next, and he's not going to be eligible in this draft class. He's going to have to wait another year, but James Pierce Jr. is a beast, and I think that he is a first-round pick in next year's draft. I'll put it on record right now, and I don't even think that's too hot of a take. If he takes the step next year and continues to elevate his game, maybe adds a couple more tricks to his bag in terms of rushing the quarterback, not just relying on his physical frame and just outpowering a guy, but starts adding a little bit of finesse to his game, which we've seen him progress into. Man, he is going to be one of the first edge rushers taken off the board, and not this year's NFL draft, but the year after his NFL draft, after his junior year. And I think that he could be extremely, extremely successful. And the archetype's kind of already there. When you look at a Byron Young for the Rams, third-round pick, some people didn't even expect him to get selected that high, but he played the Leo spot at Tennessee under Josh Heupel, and he has had a phenomenal rookie season for the LA Rams. I think he's in second right now behind a teammate in sacks for a rookie, but at one point recently, he was the top sack leader amongst all rookies. That includes a Will Anderson and all these guys that were taken very early and projected to be the next stars at the NFL level. Byron Young, outside linebacker, has been one of the brighter rookies at that position. James Pierce Jr. plays the same position at Tennessee. We just saw him in coverage come up with that big interception. Maybe he can start to lean into that a little bit more too, as he'll be asked to a little bit more in some of these NFL schemes. He could be the guy, though, that I think is the next, not only surefire star at the NFL level, but he could be a superstar, man. He is extremely, extremely talented, and I'm excited to see what he does at the next level. Let's pivot away from football, though. We have two more questions, one on the basketball side and then one on the baseball side, as that is coming up really, really quickly. Going back to PA Vol fan, he asks, can men's basketball maintain this level of play through March? And I understand the concern, right? Because under Rick Barnes, the ceiling has been a Sweet 16. You got that under Grant and Admiral back in the 2019 year when that was a team that felt like it was as good as anyone in the country. Unfortunately, there was a lot of teams that year that were really, really good. Purdue ends up beating Tennessee, was phenomenal. Virginia wins the national championship. Texas Tech was phenomenal, falls a game short. Auburn was great that year under Bruce Pearl. There was a lot of teams that season that were really, really tough asks to beat. And ultimately, only one team can find their way to a national championship. And Tennessee is a Lamonte Turner no foul argument away from reaching their second ever Elite Eight. So that stinks, and that stings. You go forward, the next year the tournament's canceled. The next year you are the 5-12 upset to Oregon State. And that wasn't necessarily a team you thought was a Final Four contender, but you obviously don't expect to lose in the first round as the higher seeded team. The next year, you come back, you have Kennedy Chandler, you play really well, and then in the round of 32, you fall to Michigan. And that's a team that felt like it could have gone really, really far. It's a team that won the SEC championship just about a week prior, and they felt like they could have made a big splash in the NCAA tournament. Fast forward another year, Tennessee comes in, they beat Duke in the round of 32. They're in the Sweet 16 against FAU, who not many people knew about heading into the tournament. Maybe this is the break Tennessee needs to make that second Elite Eight, and it doesn't happen. They fall to FAU, who ends up being a really good team, and it looks pretty solid this year as well. But overall, they've been underachieving teams under Rick Barnes, right? I think you have to put in perspective a little bit that the Sweet 16 is still a pretty impressive feat in March Madness. I always say the basketball NCAA tournament is the most fun way to decide a champion, but probably the dumbest way if you want to figure out who the best team is, just because of all the variables that are attached to it. But it's a lot of fun. And one off night, one off half, one off quarter of a game, or just few minute stretch could be your season right there. This team is good, though. This team, if you go to KenPom.com, which does a great job outside of just the AP poll, coaches poll, and all of that, of kind of breaking down how good every team is. Tennessee's number 6 in the country. In the AP poll, they're number 5. They're the number 2 in adjusted defensive efficiency on KenPom. The only team higher than them is Houston, who has a sizable lead, though. That's a very good basketball team. And they're the number 1 team in the country, according to KenPom. The difference is on offense. Normally, Tennessee is pretty poor on KenPom, about middle of the pack in terms of the NCAA tournament caliber teams. This year, they're number 30. And that number, you might be saying, that's outside the top 25, this and that. Number 30 is pretty solid for if you're talking offensive or adjusted offensive efficiency. That's ahead of some pretty solid basketball teams. Texas, Florida, JMU, who's a really good team this year. San Diego State, who's coming off of a Final Four run. Kansas, Villanova, Texas Tech. There's a lot of pretty solid teams in Arkansas who's struggling this year, but you shouldn't sleep on. A lot of good teams that are behind Tennessee in adjusted offensive efficiency. And that comes through a Dalton Connect. That comes from Josiah-Jordan James being more experienced in knowing kind of what to do at this level now, I guess. But you have a lot of offensive pieces you feel good about. Zakai Ziegler's heating up. Santiago Vespi settling into his role a little bit more. Jonas Adu showing that he can be a threat on the offensive end his junior year. This team's really good. They might be the best team Rick Barnes has had. I would love to see this team go up against the 19 Grant Admiral, Jordan Bowen, Lamonte Turner, Jordan Bowden, and Kyle Alexander. Go down the list of other great players on that team. I would love to see what a game between them would look like. But this team's really good, and they could make an NCAA tournament run. Do I think they can maintain this level of play? Absolutely. Will they? We'll have to see. It's a long season. You have to kind of peak at the right time in college basketball. But Tennessee looks really good right now. Number 5 team in the country, and they've got to be the favorite to win the entire SEC this year. So it'll be a fun season. I implore you, if you're a Tennessee fan that is like, I'll start watching in March. I don't want to get my hopes up. This team's fun. Even if you don't want to get your hopes up, it's just a fun basketball team to watch. So I really recommend turning on these Tennessee basketball games because this team is an awesome watch. Last question. Baseball season beginning in February. PA Vol fan asks, baseball season prediction, and then who's a player we haven't heard of yet that will be good? Tennessee baseball is on track to have another really good season. Under Tony Vitello, there shouldn't be any other expectation, right? But this team brings a lot of pieces from last year's team back. Drew Beam is a guy that stands out, obviously. He's going to be your ace pitcher. He's coming back for his junior year. You have big hitters like a Christian Moore in the middle infield, like a Blake Burke at first base, who are coming back for their junior seasons. Drew Beam and Christian Moore both named preseason All-Americans by Perfect Game. And then you bring in a group of transfers that could be really, really good. A Billy Amick, another guy out of Clemson, who is a preseason All-American by Perfect Game, though that list coming out today. So they have this group of incoming guys through the portal, freshmen, maybe guys that were freshmen last year or sophomores last year that haven't had a chance yet to prove themselves, and then a really solid group of returners, even though you lost a lot to the MLB draft. And what that should result in is a really good regular season that gives you a good seed in Hoover for the SEC tournament, puts you in a position to make a run there, and then likely you're hosting a regional, which you weren't able to do last year. Even though you made the College World Series run, you played on the road throughout the entirety of the NCAA tournament. You should be a top 16 team, in my opinion, that's able to host that regional. And then if everything goes right, you could also play your well into a top 8 seed, and then you're sitting in a spot where you could host a super regional. Tennessee has the expectations to go to Omaha every year. This year is going to be no different. It's tough. It's hard. It's like March Madness in basketball, where just a couple off days, a couple off innings can be the differential of your season, right? Clemson probably feels that way last year. They felt like they had Tennessee down. Then Zane Denton hits a crazy home run while Tennessee's back to the wall. And next thing you know, Tennessee's in Omaha and Clemson is at home. So the expectations are high. Who's going to be a player that's going to break out? Because baseball, it's tough to keep track of. I understand that. It's tough to figure out the recruiting classes with all the moving pieces and who's going to be a guy like there is every year that I didn't know heading into the year, but I definitely know by the end of the year. To me, there is an easy answer. It's going to be a true freshman middle infielder, Ariel Antigua. He's a short guy. He's sitting at 5'8". That's what he was listed at out of high school. But this kid is a stud. He reminds you of those Jose Altuve, Dustin Pedroia type of middle infielders where they're short in stature, but if they barrel it up, that ball's going. And he's showing throughout those fall practices that we were able to watch in the Orange and White World Series that he is a very consistent hitter. And not only is he a consistent hitter, but he does a very good job in those middle infield roles at second base, at shortstop, of making plays with his glove, delivering accurate throws to first, flipping those double plays, doing everything you ask a middle infielder to do. He's a true freshman, but I think that at least by the end of the year, and in my opinion, probably heading into the season, he's your starter at shortstop or second base, whichever they decide to do with it. I don't even think Tony knows exactly what they want to do with it. With Christian Moore, will he stay at second? Will he flip to short? That'll be interesting to see. But I think opposite whatever Christian Moore does, Ariel Antigua will be that guy there. So keep your eyes on his name, even if maybe it's not a breakout season this year. By the end of the time that he's had at Tennessee, he will be, I think, a fan favorite. He is a great, great baseball player. So keep your eye out for him. Keep your eye out for Tennessee baseball because they're starting soon, guys. It doesn't feel like baseball season, but in less than 2 months, Tennessee baseball is taking the field. So I'll pull up the exact date really fast. Texas Tech, February 16th in the Shriners Children's College Showdown over in Arlington, Texas. Your home opener, February 20th against UNC Asheville. It's coming up, guys. If you love baseball, make sure you head over to VolReport.com because we do cover that as well. We have basketball coverage, men's and women's. As I'm recording this, the women's team is in Auburn, about to take on the Tigers in their first game of SEC play. And the men's team, of course, getting things started on Saturday for their SEC slate. And then football season, everyone says it's never over in Knoxville. It's always football season in Knoxville. So we have coverage on that front as well as we kind of wrap up Citrus Bowl stuff and head into a full offseason before Josh Heupel, Nico Imaliava, and all of them head back to the football field in Neyland Stadium. So head over to VolReport.com, grab yourself a subscription over there. Like I said at the top of the show, if you want to be a part of the next mailbag show, grab yourself a subscription, head over to the Rocky Top Forum. I thought this went well. I thought it was fun. Let me know what you guys think. But when we do it again, if you want to submit a question, head over to the forum and you can be a part of the next show that we do in this kind of formula. But thank you guys for watching. Links to everything you need is in the description. And thanks.